Hi, my name is Melissa McGee. I'm the head coach at The Ohio State University. Today, we're going to be talking about how to best prepare high school dancers to make a college dance team. So welcome to class. Let's get started. As a high school coach or even a middle school coach, you can definitely have a huge impact in making a high school student better their chances to make a college dance team. Today, we're going to talk about three different things. One would be the types of auditions that exist in the college dance team world. Two, what that timeline generally looks like. And then three, what are some very practical tips that you as a coach could help any high school student with as they're thinking about preparing or even in the midst of their college auditions. So let's start by talking about the three different types of auditions that exist. The very first one is the most traditional, and I would say the most widespread, and that would be your traditional open audition. So usually a team will post, whether it's on their social media accounts or on their website, exactly when they're having auditions, and it's a true open call. Maybe there's 50 kids, maybe there's 200, and then it might be a day, it might be 2 or 3 days, but they would go through a series of combinations, technique, likely make some cuts in the midst of that to get to their final number and announce the team that way. It's pretty traditional and it's definitely used, but there's a lot of programs, particularly the more competitive from a nationals perspective, that are moving away from that model and actually going towards a video audition model, invite only. So that model is a little different in the sense that you have to submit, if you are a high school senior, a video for the coach to review. They'll have a specific date that they want all of their submissions in by. They'll sit down usually at one point and just review every single video and then make a cut within the videos that they've gotten on who they want to invite to their on-campus tryout. So the pros of this are that you can have an early filter within the group. And as a coach, it's beneficial because you're going to know who's going to be showing up at your audition, as well as for any dancers that are out of state or might have a far way to travel. It's a nice filter beforehand to understand that if you're in consideration or if you're not. So that's sort of the second type of audition. And then the third type is actually very new. There's only a handful of schools that are operating off of this, and that is a truly recruiting-based model. So that model is much more congruent to what you would see in college athletics, where coaches are actually going out, whether that's to high school competitions or studios, or making relationships with high school coaches and seeking out dancers to become a part of their program. Most of these programs do have a video element, which is that you can submit a recruiting video to a portal, typically by a specific date, in order to be considered and start the recruiting process. But then from there, it's sort of reverse, where the coach is actually making contact with the dancer or the high school coach to help pursue that specific individual for their program. That model is much more fluid. There aren't as strict of deadlines, but each program would be a little bit different. So in any of those scenarios, it's really important to start early. So we're going to talk through the timeline and how you can help make sure if you have any high school. Kids that you're working with, that they would be on track to set them up for success, because that is really the key here. The more proactive you are and the more well-researched you are, and those will be themes throughout, the better your chances are going to be as a candidate for any college dance team. So if you start talking about at the beginning of a freshman year, really that year is for you to build your foundation, both in school and in dance. So your freshman year academically, you're trying to get your best GPA, and your freshman year from a dance perspective, you're trying to continue further your training, your fundamental technique, things of that nature. As you think about your sophomore year, a couple of things change. From an academic standpoint, that would be an appropriate time, if you haven't already, to start thinking about standardized testing. So often we have students that forget that the first step to getting into or onto a dance team is actually getting into the university first. So that is really important to start early on your standardized testing, so you don't have so much pressure on the back end when you're trying to achieve XYZ score in order to get admitted to the school. So the earlier you prepare, the earlier you give or the more shot you give yourselves to really do that with your leisure and take many practice exams. On the dance side, you can start to consider going to, if you haven't already, any college prep clinics that might exist. Usually, every school has a clinic or an intensive for high school students. And then you can also start looking for recruiting opportunities. So, for high school students, there are opportunities where you can go to a specific university or college. Or there are also what we call combines, which is very similar to what you would imagine, where all of the students come to a specific location. And then there is a set of coaches from universities and colleges as well. And we set it up kind of like a career fair, if that makes sense. But the students will learn combinations and technique. And then there's usually networking opportunities for those students to come and speak with coaches during the breaks or even a separate time, and they can learn more about programs that way. It's definitely appropriate as a sophomore to attend those events, if not only to see where do you need to work on and improve as a dancer, but also start to get exposure to colleges and programs. Once you shift into your junior year, that is really a big year as it relates to starting to buckle down and get really serious about college and where you want to go to next. This is hard to get those high school kids in that mindset because they're only 2 years into high school and so much is still going to change. But it is really important from a planning and research perspective to start down the path of exploring options. So from an academic standpoint, as a junior, you should be starting to take your standardized tests to get an idea of where you are within the range and how much work you might need to put in to improve your score for any schools that you might be interested in. And additionally, you should starting to be thinking about what type of a dance team do you want to be on. To dance in college or at a university, there are so many options. You can go from a small school to a big school. You can stay local. You can go far away. You can go to a competitive school. You can go to a game day only school. There's also dance teams that really just work with the marching band. So there's plenty of options for really anybody, but it is about doing the research and figuring out what programs you want to get into. Once you've started to do both of those things, I would highly suggest you sit down with the parents as a dance team coach or maybe mentor to a high school student and the student and really talk about all of the options. I like to make a grid. You can kind of put academics across the top and dance along the side and really put the schools into 3 different buckets. The first one being any safe schools you're going to get into. The second one being target schools where you think it's right in your range. And then the third one being any reach schools. That's pretty easy to do from an academic standpoint because you would have your standardized test. You would look up what the admissions requirements are for those schools, and you'd be able to plot that out on one axis. On the other axis, you want to think about the dance teams. And that's where you as a coach really need to help guide your student. This is one of the places where coaches can be the most beneficial to a high school student, is helping to guide them to the appropriate choices for their skill level. If they really want to go to a competitive team, then you need to help guide them on where that would fit in their skill set. Always best for them to identify first if they think that's in their safe target or reach zones. But if they're putting it in the wrong sort of category, you can help course correct. And that way you're avoiding any disappointment down the road. So once you have the academics on the top and then the dance on the sides, you can start to figure out, okay, which schools are right in my target zones for both, which might be a reach academically, but from a dance perspective, I could absolutely make the team. And that helps to educate the dancer on what they might be walking into. The third factor to consider, and really where you can help bridge the gap between the dancer and their parents, is there is a financial feasibility aspect. So if any of the schools that are appearing on the grid are out of state, you could help encourage and facilitate or maybe nudge the student to have that conversation with their parents on, from a financial perspective, what are we actually able to pursue? And that might either add options or remove options from the plate accordingly. So after you've identified that sort of set of options, your junior year you want to use to start really taking visits, if that's an option for you as a student or for a coach, to encourage your students. That way they can get to the school, see the school, meet the team, meet the coach, and get to know things that way and a little bit more intimately than just what they can find online. Moving into the senior year, that summer between their junior year and their senior year is really, really important. If there's any intensives that the schools offer, I would definitely recommend going to those. But really, that summer could be spent on preparing everything they need for their audition their senior year. So that's an appropriate time to get headshots. You might have to make a dance resume. You might have to make an audition video, depending on the format that we talked about in the beginning that the school uses. That's an appropriate time to make sure that those things are being taken care of. That way, when you move into your senior year and you're guiding a high school student who's already going to be stressed about what's next and really just wants to enjoy their senior year, there's no friction about having to get those things done. Once you move into your senior year, it's really just making sure that you're adhering and compliant with any deadlines that exist for the programs that you're looking into. So as a coach, you can guide that student to make sure that they make a calendar, make sure that they understand what those deadlines are, and then certainly could help them film that audition video if they have not yet done that. And then usually, depending on the model, those college auditions would be in the spring. The earliest are usually in early March, and the latest happening all the way through the end of July, depending on how big the school is, and what type of team they are, what calendar they operate on. So really important to kind of understand that overarching timeline. As a coach, there's just a couple of ways that I would really encourage you to help your individual high school student. The first, as I mentioned, is helping them to understand what set of schools are within their actual realm of possibilities. So as I mentioned, you can really help be the guide for what schools are really competitive and what match up to their skill set. It is your responsibility as a coach to make sure that you are setting up your dancers for success. So if they are going to a Reach Schools clinic, helping to level set their expectations so they can perform to their best abilities is definitely something that you would want to take responsibility for, making sure that you're setting them up with realistic expectations. The second thing is, once they get into those visits, you can absolutely and should absolutely prepare them for what they're going to expect once they go to the visits. So I would have a sit-down one-on-one meeting with them to walk through exactly what they should expect and what you expect of them if they're representing your team from a high school perspective. So the first thing that I would talk to them about is if they are going to reach out and have any communication with the team or the coach ahead of time, what is the best method to do that? I would recommend email because most people operate off of that. However, it should always come from the individual dancer and not from their parents. As a college coach, I've never met a college coach that wants to hear from a dancer's parents. They always want to hear from the dancer themselves. That is how we operate our teams once you come to us. So that is what most of us are used to. So helping that dancer to draft an email that is appropriate, using proper grammar, full words, it's not a text, it's a full email, is absolutely something that you can help with. Once they make that initial contact, having them navigating through those conversations is helpful. If they're going to meet with the coach before or after a clinic, or maybe a teammate, you also want to sit down with them and prepare them for how they should structure that conversation. Sometimes the coach might lead it and they might guide the conversation, ask for questions. But what I do is I sit down with the high school student and I'm ready to ask any question that they have. What it shows me as a college coach is how prepared are they and how are they going to approach future meetings when they're on my team. So I love it when prospective dancers come with a list of questions. And that can be anything from academic to how does your team operate to, when do you practice? The thing that you want to guide them to is doing the research ahead of time. So there's a ton of resources out there. Most college dance teams will have a website. They have active social media accounts. So you're going to want their dancer to research the program first and then develop a list of questions.
I'm going to tell her so grateful for a supportive community.
Research, they know what's out there, they know what information exists, and these are supplemental questions that they can't get answered from the website or the social media account. They are really smart and educated about what's out there, and these are additional. So you're going to want to guide them for conversations that they could ask in that moment. If they're just going to a clinic for the first time and they are not ready to meet with a coach yet, you can also prepare them for what does that meeting look like too. So normally it's very common courtesy to say thank you for the clinic or the experience that you've had. And so often people travel very far distances to come to a clinic. They don't introduce themselves and they don't say their name and I know nothing about them. They just say thank you and they leave. Where that's a great opportunity to have them make a first impression, have a first introduction. So preparing them with an introduction like, hi, my name is Melissa McGee. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. This is my first clinic. I enjoyed X, Y, and Z, and I'll be in touch with the future about future opportunities to meet. That would be a great intro where as a coach, then I can take that whichever direction I want to. Great, can't wait to meet you in the future, or at least I know where you're from and what you liked about the clinic. So really guiding and role playing with your dancer, those scenarios will be very beneficial. Most of our high school kids have a really hard time articulating and communicating in person. So it's a very easy way for your dancer that you're preparing to stand out if they're well rehearsed and well prepared from a verbal perspective, because what that shows us as a coach is how are they going to handle the more public relations side of a team. If that is a team that does events and appearances or operates on game day, talking to fans and just having basic conversations is a huge part of what we do. So we want to make sure that we're recruiting and we're having dancers that can have those conversations and do all the fancy technical things too. But there's a whole other side to dance team that you can see in those interactions. So after they've gone and done all of their sort of like research, met the coaches, engaged with the team, and it's time to make the video audition or a recruitment video, you as a dance coach should absolutely be helping to at least review that before it's sent off. The biggest thing that you want to make sure is that they're adhering to all the guidelines. They've worn whatever they're supposed to wear, which is a big thing that you can help them research for teams, whether they're going to a clinic or just making a recruitment video. What is the look of the team? Are they the team that goes hair down, full curls, half top sparkles? Or are they the team that goes slick back bun, all black, really clean look? You want to make sure you're setting up your dancer for success. So whether that's the recruitment video or the clinic, helping to guide them for that. In the recruitment video, making sure that they have a clean background, there's not distraction, there's not excess noise in the video. And then if there is a time limit, the dancer is absolutely adhering to that. The easiest way for a routine or a video to be thrown out is if it's over the time limit. Coaches in college don't have a lot of time, and so they want dancers that follow instructions, and this is the first test. So you can make sure that you've read the requirements of the video audition. I fully believe that the dancer should lead the creation of that video, but you can sort of be the audit point to make sure that they're checking all of those boxes to ensure that they're setting themselves up for success. And then finally, if there's an in-person audition, you can absolutely walk them through a mock audition. Have people watch, get them into a high pressure situation so that the first time they're not doing their skills by themselves with people watching is in that audition for the first time. A lot of times familiarity helps people be more comfortable and then ultimately perform at their best. So you want to make sure you're sort of mocking up that environment for them as best as you can. If there is an in-person interview component to the audition, that is another way that you can help as a coach. Sit them down across the table, give them mock interview questions you absolutely know. Give us your name, where you're from, tell us a little bit about yourself. Why did you choose to come to this university? Why do you want to be on the dance team? Those are all common questions that you could expect. Make sure that they're prepared and have really clear and concise answers for those. The other ones they're going to have to answer a little bit more on the fly, but you can already predict those questions. So best to set them up for success in those as well. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an overview of the different types of college auditions, the timeline that you could expect, and then how as a high school coach or even a dance mentor, you could help someone best prepare them for a college dance team and making it and hopefully having a successful career. So I hope that was helpful and helpful tips to apply, and best of luck.